Um, Welcome everyone to another episode of Journeys to Inspire, part of Pathways to Leadership, which is also part of the Alliances project. My name is Lee Thomas. I'm the founder of the Alliances and Regional Director for South Africa, but I'm actually joined today by one of our very influential, if you like, I don't know if you like that, Kevin, influential members of the CISO Alliances community for the UK and the Alliances community as a whole. The focus of these recordings and capturing of this content is to give examples of how leaders are getting to the point of leadership, if you like, the mantle that's out there. And C-level role in terms of information security would be the CISO role, right? So it's a version of how people are getting there, and Kevin's authentic version of getting there. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but I'm sure people will have some affinity towards it. But yeah, over to you, Kev. Can you introduce yourself just for people who are not familiar?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Kevin Fielder. I'm currently CISO for NatWest Box and Metal, previously CISO for FNZ, previously CISO for Just Eat. So it's my third CISO gig. Also my third first CISO gig. So which probably gives you a hint to the kind of things I like doing. I'm more of a kind of a builder rather than a crank the handle kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
Been around security for probably over 20 years now, which is a bit scary, and in tech and other bits for about 25 years or so, 26 years, something like that. So yeah, that ages me a little bit. But yeah, I've been around it for quite a long time. Really enjoy it. I think one of the things for me is that I love having to learn new things. So the reason why I kind of got into it, we'll probably delve into a bit more later, but I think with some jobs you kind of get to the point when you're kind of done because you know it, and security you don't, and I really enjoy that because you've got to keep evolving and keep learning, but obviously it does make it harder work. You've got to keep evolving and learning. Outside of work, I do some advisory stuff. So I technically still kind of work, but outside my day job, I advise kind of startups on security and how to talk to people. And I think I advise a recruitment LT Harbour recruitment agency, Cybermaniacs. Done a few more previously. Just generally kind of advice on growing a business, how to approach CISOs, how to approach security teams, that kind of stuff. And then I also do some coaching as well. So I'm a strength and conditioning coach for some Thai boxers, which I really enjoy just because it's like the opposite of the office job. So it's like, throwing weights around and slam balls and burpees and rowing and all the kind of cool gym stuff and shouting at each other and high fives and all the kind of bro stuff in inverted commas. So that's just a good aside from that. And I also keep myself busy with having a daughter who's going to be 8 in October and a son who is nearly 5 months old. So, yeah,
Amazing.
pretty hectic life.
Yeah, I was going to say the schedule's quite full, mate. The schedule's full. It's got to be. So I appreciate the time for this. But no, it's good. And it's interesting you say your CISO journeys have always been. I suppose you've encouraged that variety with them, right? You briefly touched on a bit of a career path there. How have you got to where you are now?
Yeah, so I guess I've kind of touched on. I've always quite liked security because of it's us against them. It's it's like probably I'm sure similar reason why people like being in the police or other kind of fight agents or whatever. Right, you're kind of pitting yourself against the bad guys in some way. I think really early in my career, prior to being in security, I still gravitated towards doing security stuff. So kind of mid-late 90s, I was where I got a chance to do security work, even though I wasn't a security person. I was building firewalls and IDSs and setting up snort IDSs on Linux boxes and that kind of fun stuff. Nice. So just enjoyed doing that sort of thing. Then I did some sort of, I think my very first job at Amuse People, I worked looking after some dental software.
Nice.
So go into dentists and troubleshoot BNC cabling. If you're not been around that long, look up what that is. It's horrible network cabling that if one bit of it breaks, the whole network fell down and stuff like that. So it's fun. And then did some other kind of technical supporty roles. So I was with Ocado for a little while from prior to them going live. So it was like 45, 50 people above a distribution center in Hemel before they had their warehouse or anything, and looking after that and spending time at like 4 a.m. trying to look at Apache and Tomcat Java logs from Apache and Tomcat over a modem, so a dial-up modem. If any of you are familiar with that, a dial-up modem and the verbosity of Java logs do not play nicely together, especially when you've got like 4 terminal windows trying to tell logs to see why something's not working. So I did my time kind of on call and that sort of stuff as well, which I think does help, not necessarily whether it's security, but having some time in operational roles before you get into whether it's security or CIO or CTO, any kind of leadership roles, because you understand the pain of operations when stuff doesn't work right. If you've never been there, it can be quite easy to kind of throw stuff over the fence to people who've got to look after it and not really understand how much pain it can cause. So I think being in some sort of operational role yeah, it might be. I think you mentioned you've spoken to someone who's in sales previously and stuff as well. It could be anything where you're front line and you deal with customer issues and things breaking does help you kind of affinity, some empathy. There we go. That's the right word for that kind of thing. Then I was working for GE Money for a while as a project doing kind of security, not security, so general kind of tech projects. And we had a virus outbreak, and I managed to fix it with some registry edits and deleting files and mucking about before Symantec, who we had as an AV vendor at the time, got a fix out.
Nice.
And that just happened to coincide with the security manager starting, who was hiring a team, and he was like, "Do you want a job?" I was like, "Yes." So yeah, kind of I kind of gravitated around doing security stuff and just got a lucky break into security. Had a funny interview at the time because like HR was like, you have to have an interview. So we had like an interview where he'd asked me silly questions like what is ping and stuff, just to like appease the tick box, even though he'd already offered me the job. So that was kind of how I got into security, like as a real job. There was also kind of some influences. A guy I used to work with when I was at Ocado called Jonathan. He was just one of those people that was extremely good at technical stuff and security and things. He got given 2 copies of Secrets and Lies by Bruce Schneier.
Nice.
And I think just 2001 I think it came out, so he gave me one of those copies of that, and it was a bit of a kind of a mentor to me in some of those ways. And that was one of my first kind of books that was like, oh yeah, I really do love this stuff. So I got into security analyst, and I sort of switched around between security and architecture a couple of times, because a lot of problems we have in security, as you'll hear a lot of people talking about, are because of things being built incorrectly. I think if you look back at security computer history, like 60s and 70s, some of the first things people wrote about computers and stuff is concerns with, can you ever build a secure operating system and security stuff? And there's some really good papers that are worth looking at from those times, because they're the same issues we still have now because we've never cracked that nut. So kind of some architecture stuff, just general architecture, on the basis that if we built stuff really well, you get rid of quite a lot of security problems, and then kind of sort of flip-flop a couple of times between those two. Then did a bunch of years at WellPay as various different security things within the team, primarily looking at everything before go live. So my team owns or is accountable for all the kind of threat modeling, design reviews, architecture reviews, code security, third-party libraries, that kind of stuff, until it got handed over to sort of it's built and running. And I also had a little bit of thing there that was quite fun, where we started looking at security as a proposition as well. So when you're a big company that sells to small companies, can you either bundle in or sell some of your security stuff as part of what you do and make security less of a cost center and more of a potentially profit center, which is really exciting. And then moved from there to my first CISO role at Just Eat, which is really cool. Everyone knows who Just Eat is, right? And that was, or if you don't, it's a food delivery company like Uber and Deliveroo and stuff, depending where you are in the world. And that's pretty cool because it's a cool, fully cloud native, DevOps, agile, fun place to work. Really easy to hire people into because like everyone wanted to work there because it's fun. And then I was CISO I did that for about 3.5 years. Moved on about the time that they were merging or being taken over by Takeaway.com. Did a couple of years at FNZ, similar kind of thing. Their first CISO, building out all the team from scratch and stuff. Did that for about 2 and a bit years, and now 6 months or so into NatWest Boxed / Metal. So we're Metal's a small bank, a bit like a Starling and Monzo for small businesses, a bank for small businesses, and Boxed is banking as a service. So looking at how we can help retailers embed payments into their systems, that kind of thing.
Nice.
And this is my smallest role in terms of company size, but it's hopefully super high growth because there's some big stuff coming. So yeah, I genuinely like building. I think as you go through your career, you realize more and more it's a people thing. So it's not just about, can you do technical things right? Everything's people. You need to get people like your board and exec and the rest of your business on side with what you're trying to deliver. You need to hire the right people and build the right team culture. So everything becomes a people thing at the end of the day. And I really enjoy kind of building teams and trying to create good cultures as well. So a bit of a ramble there, but that's kind of how I got to where I am and some of why I like doing it.
No, mate, it's great. You can see a passion coming through on it, and why you do what you do. But you're right, it's horses for courses, and we touched on in the other JTI platform with women leaders in STEM when we did a focus for Father's Day with you, and 3 of the other guys in the community. We were talking about the gender gap, right? And it's you can't just force it to happen, right? You have to find the right people for the right opportunity. I think what you've done really well, not that I'm anyone to judge, right, is you've been quite selective in what roles are suitable for you. You've not found yourself quite at all stagnant in your career. and that's kudos to you, mate, because it's quite brave, because people need to obviously just take roles to progress the CV and so on and so forth. I've experienced replacing a few people in South Africa, and this is a similar sort of story. You find that the exposure that you gave yourself through some of the more inverted commas junior roles that you uptook has helped you position what type of CISO you are now? Did you find the appetite for certain areas as you were coming through the ranks of going, yeah, this is what I'm really going to push in my environment when I get to the top, assuming that you were ambitious to get there? It sounds like you were.
Yeah, so I guess it's I think being well rounded is probably any kind of leadership role definitely helps, right? If you've only ever done one kind of thing, it can be really hard to have a broader view. So I think it definitely helps you. And if you look at how roles work, right, you can, as you progress, you can kind of be really, really awesome at something. So you could be the best type of Java developer or whatever it is you are, right? Or super cool at threat hunting or whatever else in security land. Or you can be kind of more broad. The more leadership roles tend to be more broad, because I kind of have to have a thin veneer of a bit of everything, right? So I need to understand a bit of kind of GRC and risk management. I need to be able to talk to the SecOps folk and translate what's happening in an instance. I need to be able to get the respect of the AppSec team and the cloud security team, whatever else. But I also need to be able to talk to execs and non-security folk and that kind of thing. So I think being well-rounded definitely helps. And I think one thing I don't know where it fits in today's chat, but I'll throw it in now. If you want to progress in security career, don't necessarily think about becoming a CISO or have a real think about what it is you want to do, right? Because being a CISO, yeah, I love it personally. But it's as I kind of mentioned at the start, it's very much a people role, and you're doing strategy and budget and planning and trying to keep a little understanding, but I'm not hands-on technical, right? There isn't there might be a CISO role where you're the CISO in a startup and there's 10 people, and you're because that's your title, but you're fundamentally actually doing security. But in most CISO roles, fundamentally you're leading a team, right? And you hire the right people, and you should hire people. I always say that anyone who's like a probably mid, maybe even kind of a good junior engineer is going to be better than me at what they do, because it's 5, 10, 15 years, whatever, since I've done that, and I've tried to get that in veneer, whereas they're a specialist in their thing. So they should destroy me, and I want them to, right? So my team should be much better than me at their different areas, and so you shouldn't be shy of hiring people that are way better than you. But you also don't necessarily, you need to understand what it is you want. So if you love being technical and love being in the weeds, maybe you want to become a really strong individual contributor and become a principal engineer or something like that, right? You can still earn really, really good money. So unless cash is your pure focus, and there's people in big orgs that probably earn more than I do as an individual contributor, right? Because in the same way as the CISO for HSBC earns more than I do, because it's a huge company, right? So if it's all about money, then you're going to want to find what's the biggest C-level job you can do in the biggest company with the biggest paycheck. But that might be miserable. You can earn we all know the security industry is not a bad paying industry, so you can earn really good money as an individual contributor or a specialist team leader, like an AppSec team leader or a head of SecOps, if that's what you love. So I know people who do SecOps and they love it. They love the cut and thrust, the fact that you never know what's going to happen. It's about instance, it's about response, it's about dealing with issues. And they really enjoy that. So they want to be a really good lead SecOps engineer or a head of SecOps something, but they want my job because they don't get to do that. I'm the person they tell what's going on so I can translate it to other people or whatever. So have a think about what it is you want in your career. Don't necessarily think, right, CISO is the top of the pile, so I have to get there. Because you might get there and be miserable because it's like, I don't do anything hands-on anymore. I create PowerPoints of what our strategy is. I do a spreadsheet for our budget. I deal with people who are off sick and want holidays and performance reviews, all of these things, which I love, because I love helping people and developing people. But it might not be what you want. So think about what you really enjoy in your career. And if it's hands-on stuff, maybe you want to be that leader of a technical team or really strong architect, principal engineer type person. So don't necessarily think because it's the top title, it's where you want to get to, because you might not enjoy it, right?
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? Everyone's got their own mantle, right? And it's great interviewing. I've only managed to interview two of the budding CISOs so far. They were two junior consultants that were mentees of a large consultancy in South Africa that I've been working with, and they attended a chapter in February, and they were just so much of a breath of fresh air in the environment, right? They were asking all the questions that everyone wanted to ask, that were afraid to ask, and it was just a breath of fresh air, like I said. But also, it's interesting because they're both sort of mid-20s. They're looking at this mantle, or one of the guys, Jared, described it as the bowling alley and the 10 pins is the seesaw, right? And he's trying to get his way down that point and putting the buffers up along the way so he doesn't fail at getting there. But it might, along the way, he might find his sweet spot and just be like, I don't need to get to that point, right? And I suppose it's being open to that as well, right? In terms of not seeing that as a failure. It depends how much you beat yourself up, really, isn't it? But if you find your fulfillment, then stay fulfilled, right? You don't necessarily get that in the next thing. Because the grass is not always greener on the other side, right? I think,
Yeah, you might get into like AppSec and discover you love coding and just go and be a dev or whatever, right? And there's no,
yeah.
yeah. So don't be. Obviously, you've got a goal. Let's build your kind of career path, right? So if I want to get to CISO, because it might be that you're not in security, you're in some other field, and you want to move into security, or it might be that you are just you love security and working your way up and go, okay, what do I want to get to? Right, I want to do this. Next step will be a kind of a manager or something. Then I'll probably want to look at a head of role or a BSO or something like that, and then the step to the CISO, right? And that's totally cool. That's your steps, and that's what you want to do. But be malleable, be flexible about what that looks like. And again, like I think doing some architecture, doing some other things for me really helped me. Doesn't mean it's right only for you. And if you do find something on your way going, in 10 years I want to be a CISO, or you get to 5 years in, I really enjoy doing this. Well, then reevaluate your plan and go off and be excellent at something completely different. Or you may have children and want to spend more time at home, whatever it is, right? So I think it's a really good thing to have a plan to aim for, but don't be super blinkered that this is all I can do, because you can. I think people get really, I know I do as well. You get really wrapped up in what you're doing as part of your identity, and if you're a CISO, I'm not a CISO in terms of who I am. Right? I really enjoy doing it, but if CISO jobs disappear tomorrow, I'm still me. And so don't try not to wrap up too much your identity in I'm going to be this. Just enjoy the journey. And if you enjoy the journey, whether you get to CISO or you change your mind or you get something else, you're going to have enjoyed your life, right?
Looking back on your career then, is there anything that you would have changed? Is there any advice that you would have given your younger self? As you have a bit of hindsight now, a couple of years in the industry.
I guess because I didn't really have a plan. I kind of got here a little bit by accident, just by kind of enjoying what I do and working. So if you are, 100% you want to get to wherever it is, probably have a bit more of a plan and some key steps. But again, as I mentioned, don't be wed to that, because plans, what's that phrase? Everyone's got a plan till they get punched in the face or something, right? But it's that kind of thing where you've always got a plan, but as soon as it goes into action, something's going to happen, right? There'll be a pandemic. There'll be, the company you work for goes bust, or your partner gets ill, or you have a kid, or you have a really good thing happens, or you get an opportunity to emigrate, whatever it is, right? So have a plan, but allow it to sort of flex and change as you grow. The other thing's probably being more consistent. So as you'll see from, I think I've got a blog post with you guys coming out this week, actually. So depending when this comes out, I think it's coming out tomorrow. So that's the 7th of September. So it's probably already out by the time you're listening to this. But talk a bit about some of my mental health journey as well, and some of the things I've been through. And I wasn't always consistent. So I went through phases of my career of really being driven and working really hard and progressing really well. And then I went through some other phases where I was a bit, either because so much was going on outside, or I just had got a bit stagnant in a role or whatever else, where I kind of eased off and wasn't progressing as much and wasn't necessarily working as hard in my career as I could be. So I guess that's two things: have a better plan and try and be more consistent. Consistency always wins. The same with like training. I always turn things into training analogies, right? You get two people to start training. One person's like, I'm going to train twice a day and absolutely smash it and go for it. And the other person goes, I'm going to be a bit more conservative and I'll start off doing 3 times a week, see how I get on. 3 months later, this person's here. 6 months later, they're injured and fed up and not doing it anymore, and this person just pressed his way past them. So try and be consistent in your effort. It's the same for anything, right? If you want to be good at blogging or podcast, whatever, the ones that are best, the ones that religiously Monday morning 10 a.m. it comes out, right? And you might have 3 people listening to start with, but then as people get into it, they know Monday morning 10 a.m. is when they get a little fix of, here's a new podcast from whatever it is, or here's a new post about something I might be interested in. So build up that consistent behavior, and that kind of builds the habits that will stand you in really good stead for progressing your career.
You're coming across as very competent, Kevin. So I'm going to ask you a different question, right? Imposter syndrome. I think the reality is, and I was young once or younger, and you look at the mantle and they're the all-knowing and the whys, and they point you in the direction that you want to go, and need to go, or they don't, and you fall out and you move on. But imposter syndrome, mate, it sort of gets overlooked that people have not felt that along the way, right? So I want to ask you, how have you managed to feel comfortable in uncomfortable environments, or finding comfort in discomfort to sort of push yourself on? How do you manage
So
that?
I guess got like a couple of sides to this one. So I think part of it is in any time you want to grow, you've got to put yourself in a position that you're a bit uncomfortable in, right?
Hmm.
If you want to get good at public speaking and you don't really like public speaking, the best way to get better at public speaking is to go and do some public speaking. So taking that example, maybe you start off doing it with, I think B-sides have like a track for people who are new, that kind of thing. So do it in front of a friendly audience who knows you're new and it's just there to help you. So, and same thing with your career, right? But it's find ways to put yourself gently outside that comfort zone rather than going, right, I've never done public speaking. I'm going to try and go and speak at a 10,000 person event and just shit myself, right? Excuse my French. Same with that. So, but you have to feel a bit of discomfort to grow.
Yeah.
So I think, so the two sides, part of me is like imposter syndrome. I think people overuse the term.
Hmm.
It's one of those things like, when people are like, oh, I've got such OCD, I like keeping things neat. And then you get people who've actually got OCD who can't leave their house without switching a light bulb on 1,000 times, right? And so people use terms when they don't really have it. People use burnout when they're a bit stressed. People say, oh, I've got OCD because they like things being neat. That's just you like things being neat, mate. You can still have a life. People with OCD can't have a life,
Yeah.
right? Or really struggle. And same with imposter syndrome. It's like, I think we live in a world where people love to have a thing. So people talk about these things, like the talk of burnout. Real burnout is when you are literally incapable of functioning and you need literally to have some time lying in a room on your own recovering kind of thing. That's actual burnout, as opposed to I'm struggling, I'm a bit stressed, which isn't great, but people I think do sometimes over-egg these things. But the conversely on that, I do quite often go to work and I'm like, how did I get here? So there is a thing, and I think that's a good thing. I think if you let it drive you, so it's like, hey, how did I get here? I've got a lot of responsibility. I better do a bloody good job then. So pull your socks up and prove you can do
Yeah.
it. And the fact that you've got the job, whatever your job is, right? If you're doing a good job and your boss is telling you you're doing a good job and your team is talking about you being a positive impact and whatever else, the evidence is you're doing it. So even if you think you're doing it well, you have evidence. So use your evidence as your story, not the voice in your head. And obviously, if you're new to it, you haven't got the evidence, but you can ease into it and try things out, right? And use it to drive you, and use it to, like, the minute you're like, I'm the best, I'm amazing, life's great, you're going to fall off. It's like you see it in again, going back to sports, you see some people get to the top of a sport and have a world title or whatever, and then they fall apart because
Complacency sets in, right?
like Conor McGregor, right? As a great example in the
Yeah.
UFC, absolutely came on the scene, changed the sport. First person in the UFC to have titles at 2 weight classes, I think. Certainly one of the first. All of this cool stuff, right? But then got rich, got famous, started being, look at me, I'm so amazing, and fell off the rails and has lost for like the last 5 fights, even though he still thinks he's the best fighter ever, right? So, and don't hold me on those numbers. I might be wrong on those numbers, but it's been not an awesome few years in terms of his fight. And then you see other people who get to the top, but they are always like, I could do better. I need to push more. The minute they get the person with the what's that famous quarterback in America, the one that won like 9 or 10. Yeah. It's not like he doesn't want one. Every time he's won one, it's like, done it, put it away. Where do I get that? How do I get the next one? How do I get the next? And they just push themselves. And that's what you need to drive yourself. Never think you're the best, because there's always going to be someone chomping at your heels. As we touched on at the start, there's always going to be something new to learn. There's going to be a new attack. Your company's going to buy another company, go into a new market, purchase new technology, have some technology that's gone out of date. Things are constantly changing, so you're never going to know it all. So use that. If you do have that bit of imposter syndrome, or how did I get here? Do I deserve this? Am I good enough? Use that to drive you to be good. Don't use it to hold you back, because the only time you ever get better is when you think you're not good enough and you push yourself. If you only ever do things you know you can do, you'll stay in the same job forever. You'll stay in the B-sides new person track forever, because it's like, hey, the only talk I can do is this talk to 4 people that are really a really nice audience, rather than I've done that now, let's go and do one to a bigger one. Let's go and do something to an audience that's a bit more challenging. Let's go and push it out there. Same with your job. So I think imposter syndrome, if you genuinely have it, and really, really struggle, try to use it as a positive thing of, it will drive you to be better, but don't let it consume you, I guess. But I don't know if I have imposter syndrome, but I definitely do. I used to hate public speaking. I'm still not a huge fan of it. And I do still turn up to work and go, how on earth did I get here? even though it's my third gig doing it and my team have given me good feedback, I'm still like, what am I doing here? They've given me like budget and responsibility. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's just like,
Definitely.
look, just use it to drive yourself and use it as a positive thing that, hey, the evidence I'm doing it right. If you're in your second or third year of any role and you're getting good feedback, you've got evidence.
Yeah.
Right? So look at the evidence and try and look at actually what's happening rather than what you're thinking is happening, I guess.
Yeah, no, fair. It's really good advice. It's something I suppose subconsciously I've done is with the alliances, without talking about what me, it's not about me, but it's a great opportunity to progress the industry on. We all know that there's legacy platforms out there which were born off the back of people wanting to learn and the loneliness of certain roles, any sort of C-level role, to allow that benchmarking to happen. Now it's dictated to by marketing spend and being the biggest and the best event out there, or whatever the case may be. I like to use that to be different in the market, to push on and to create different services. If they don't work, they don't work, right? I'll still be an imposter at the end of it, right? It doesn't really matter. But at least push yourself and try and get out to that same zone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's nothing. I think we talk about it in kind of entrepreneurship quite a lot, right? In the I don't know what South Africa's like, but certainly in the UK, there's less of a let's go and have a chance and it doesn't matter if it goes wrong. Whereas in the US, they're very much just go for it.
Yeah.
And if it goes wrong, it's fine. If you've had
The
three
American
failures,
dream, right?
yeah, and it's kind of like, and that is true, right? If you don't try, if you try, you might fail, but if you don't try, you will fail,
Mm.
right? And I think that's
Yeah.
a really good way to look at it. It's like, well, if I have a go at this and it doesn't work out, I'll try something else.
Mm-hmm.
Don't have a go at it, you'll never know, right? So even if you are, I'm going to be terrible at public speaking, get your presentation, practice your talk, go and try it.
Mm.
What's the worst going to happen, right? It's a 20-minute talk in front of some, think of security, you go to a security conference, you have a 20-minute chat in front of some security folk. Worst case, it wasn't their best 20 minutes. Nothing bad's going to happen to you. You just go, and you can introduce yourself. Oh, this is the first time I've ever done this. So it'd be great to have some feedback, but please be gentle because I've not talked in front of an audience like this before. Just be open about it,
Yeah.
and people are mostly going to be kind and kind of let you grow. And same with roles, right? If you are, because a lot of companies will take someone on as their first, taking a CISO example, they don't necessarily expect you to have everything, right? So your very first CISO job, a company, it'll often be at the sort of slightly lower pay end of the CISO world. And it might be a smaller team or slightly lower expectations, or in an industry where there's, so it might not be, you might be lucky to get your first CISO role when you've never done it before in their financial services because there's money at stake or whatever. But fundamentally, they're going to know you're going to grow, right? It's the reason why they're getting you at the lower percent, quartile or whatever it is of the salary range, is because they're taking a bit of a chance on you stepping up into the role. You're taking a bit of a chance on them because they've not had a CISO before, or they're taking, they might not know exactly what it looks like because they've not done it either. And you learn and grow together. So you can treat all these things as kind of a growth thing where it's like, okay, I've not done it. You're taking me on knowing I've not done it. I've got quite a few years experience. This is what I bring to the table. And we'll grow together. And you can have training. And one of the other key things, I guess, when it comes to building teams, which is slightly aside from the imposter stuff, but you hire people to fill your gaps.
Mm.
Taking me as an example, because I've had more of a technical IT-ish background, if I'm building out as my team grows, I'll make sure I've got people who've got the kind of GRC and the softer side stuff as well to bolster that. And if you come from maybe a risk background or a non-security background, you might go, right, I'm really good at teams and budgets and great at talking to execs and things, but I don't necessarily know audience and security. So I'll hire really strong technical people that can help me make sure that we have a rounded team. So initial team's just you can round your skills out by hiring the people that are really good at the stuff you're less good at.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. It's knowing your weak points as well and knowing your strengths. And again, using the imposter side of things then to progress one area or leverage the skills in there, right? You aren't going to be a master of all, right? Cool. I think you do a lot anyway, mate. You've spoken about your advisory roles and coaching and things like that you do in the background, specifically to your industry and with the next generation in mind. How do you pay it forward? What sort of things are you involved in to do that?
So I try to, in my actual jobs, I try to kind of live what I breathe. So when I
Yeah.
have the capacity to do, I look to hire people. Like one of my most successful hires at Just Eat was a apprentice who was in Sainsbury's 2 weeks before he started with us.
Nice.
So I think one of these things that's just a slight aside that is interesting when you talk about talent shortage and stuff. I think it depends on your team size and what you need. When you've got a very small team, you do need really strong technical people. If I'm hiring 3 people, I can't have 2 people who've not got any experience, right? Because they won't. I need people who get off the ground and just get stuff done, because that's what I've got. As your team grows, you can then blend that kind of talent pipeline. So I think if you're hiring people and building teams, look at your talent pipeline. And it's again one of those things that you can make selfish, right? So that if I have a talent pipeline and people come right through it, when my senior leaves in a couple of years, because you obviously you can't have everyone as a manager, right, or a leader. If they move on to another role, I've got someone who's come up through that knows our company backwards, that's got a bit of gratitude, and because we've helped them progress their career, he then becomes a senior, then helps the next junior. So make sure when you build your team profiles, you get in some junior folk and look outside the norm, right? So I've got nothing against degrees. I've got a degree, I've got a master's, right? And I think, but look at people who are doing apprentice schemes, look at different ways of getting people in, look at people in your organization who are maybe doing end user support, that kind of thing. It's help people progress into security within your team and within your company. Outside of work, I do a little bit of light mentoring. Just I've had a few people ask me for mentoring and stuff. So just as it's not something I do as a chargeable thing, but I do mentor the odd person who asks for some help. And I genuinely when I put stuff on LinkedIn and stuff that says, hey, my door's open if you are struggling with anything, I genuinely mean that, right? So my door is open if people want to ask advice, or if they're struggling with mental challenges or whatever else I've got experience in. But yeah, so it's just generally kind of trying to promote that in the industry. I also try and promote really good team cultures. So I think when you manage a team, you can kind of create a microcosm. So obviously there's certain things you can't do, but in a company, even if the company doesn't have the world's best culture, you can make your team really good, because right, HR and stuff have no idea what your team's doing, right? So if you want to allow a bit more flexibility and whatever else, or you want to make it, just a really friendly culture, or build that team, you can build a really strong team culture, even in an organization that's not necessarily quite there yet. And then other people see how well your team does and kind of want to follow that as well. So yes, I think most what I do outside of kind of talking and other stuff is just looking at how I can make sure I live what I breathe, and how I can offer whatever time I've got spare to help other people in the industry, give them advice, whatever else.
No, fair play, mate. I'm sure it's impactful. I'm sure there's a lot of gratitude along the way, right? Because the other thing, I think what holds a lot of people back is that, do people really care about my opinion? Like this as an example, and I've asked a few people in the South Africa community that I feel is quite influential. Like we've got WhatsApp groups and things like that. People are quite vocal on there, and there's certain people in that group that steer a lot of the conversation, right? And traditionally wouldn't be a keynote or invited to be a keynote of an event because they might not be perceived as a senior enough decision maker or don't have enough budget, right? Which is why most people get invited for those sort of things. But it's mad to think that they go, well, will they really care about my journey? And yes, it's an example, right? It's just a version of the truth, and clearly you've pushed yourself to make sure that you free up time for that. And, from my side, thanks for doing that, right? Even though I don't benefit from it direct, but I'm sure people do.
Yeah, I think like it's really important to make sure that's another thing that's very important. I think you mentioned having some younger people asking all those questions, right? I think having people ask the questions and being open to that is super important. It comes back to diversity as well, right? The more diverse your team is, the less you'll have more and more people in your team who you don't necessarily agree with how they think, or you may struggle to interact with them because they have very different styles, but you'll get the better outcomes, right? So you want to be really open to challenge. I love learning, and you don't learn from everyone who agrees with you, right? If all you do is hang out with people who think the same as you, it feels great. Like everyone's like, oh yeah, Kev, really good idea, Kev. Well done, Kev. Brilliant idea. And it's like, yeah, that feels good for about a week. And then suddenly you realize that you're not progressing, you're not learning, and you've got a security program or whatever it is you're doing, but it's just one person's idea. And maybe year one, that's okay, because year one is the whole, right, let's do the basics. But as soon as you've got past that, then it becomes much more nuanced and much more, well, how do we do this? What's the best thing to do next? What's the biggest risk? What do we deal with it? Is it interesting ways of doing things? Can we automate that? Should we even be doing that just because everyone else is? All those kind of things, right? And it's sometimes people are new in the industry just ask, why are we doing that? And you're like, I don't actually know, just because it's what we always do. No matter how forward thinking you are and how much you try and learn, it's very easy because people like consistency. People like routine. it's very, there's probably very few people listening to it who haven't got some routine, like they get the same coffee from the same place every day, or even things like how you lie in your bed when you go to sleep, or what time you go to bed, or those things. You inadvertently get a lot of routines, and it's really hard not to. So those are the same things, and you go, right, I did this in my last job, I'll come to the next job, right, I'm going to cookie cutter that in there, and it's all good. And then someone goes, but why? And you're like, good question. So it's not necessarily that it's wrong, but is it the best thing you can be doing? So again, coming back to helping people and people, the benefits of that, right? The more opinions and diverse thought you have in your teams, the better outcomes you'll have. And there's a metric shit ton of studies that evidence this, right? So I think if you're as a leader of whether your team's 2 people or 50 people, right? You can help with this. Make sure they're not all copies of you. Make sure they're people that you want to get on with, and you want to build a close-knit team, but there should be some division and there should be some heated debates in your team. And as long as you've got that the maturity within your team, that right, once we've made a decision, we all get behind it. You can't have that person who 6 months later is still going, oh, we should have done this and I didn't agree with that. Well, no, we had the debate, had the discussion, and either because of consensus or because occasionally as a leader you have to go, no, right, we're just doing that because we need to get moving. But generally speaking, having that diversity of thought in teams and companies, just you do better, right? I'm kind of talking the horse a little bit, but it is really important. And that's where getting people in the industry from different backgrounds, helping people come to the industry from completely different areas of the business or different companies really will pay you dividends. Might need a little bit more love to start with to get them up to speed, but as your growth will pay you dividends in terms of your performance.
Absolutely. I think, that's again part of the projects, right? Is that we are gathering the truths of the community, right? Okay, it's opinion led, so buckets of salt with some of it, right? But I just think the industry, because of the routine of the channels for strategic growth and education out there, will go to an analyst organization as an example, right? But some treat that as gospel when it comes to what they do, right? And it's so much good work goes into the output from analysts. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's what your business needs, and that business alignment and matching that business alignment with what's out there with the trends is critical. Some people seem to struggle with that a little bit and forget that, okay, why do we need this question? Does that fit in with this, right? So that's the opportunity with that. To close off, I'm sure there's you've mentioned or hinted towards a few people that have helped you along the way. It's just an area of the content gathering where we allow or encourage the community to thank those that have helped them along the way. So platforms, individuals, doesn't matter about competitors or perceived competitors with the alliances, right? Is there any platforms out there or any individuals that you want to shout, to say thanks? Many moons ago you had a chat with them and they went, actually, I steered my career a little bit, right?
Yeah, so platforms, I don't think so. I mean, I'm a member of obviously this one and Club C2 and things, so I've got much more into them as I've grown. So I don't know if there are platforms for more junior people. I think that's an area that we could grow, right? I think you guys, what you're doing here is probably great, right? So I'm part of the advisory board for Club CISO. I'm on this. I'm in another one called Cyber Kingdom and stuff. So there's a few WhatsApp groups and chat groups I'm in now that are really useful, but they're very much security leadership CISO type ones. So they're great now, but it didn't necessarily help me get here. In terms of my career, probably Jonathan Sartin, I mentioned, the guy who sort of first showed me some security stuff at Ocado. He was brilliant, and I still chat to him occasionally to this day.
Nice.
Yeah, he was a great guy, really just a fountain of awesome knowledge. Also at Ocado, actually, is a lady called Cheryl Nixon. She was one of those people at a time I thought was a real pain, because she would ask those questions that were just annoying, but it was those questions that made you think. So it's like I said, the person was why, right? So she was brilliant at like challenging stuff and making you try and really explain the why and the how, so that you got to the best answer because someone was asking those annoying questions, right? So those two probably early on in my career are massive influences. And then I guess more recently, the one that I'd shout out is David Williams, who was the CIO for Just Eat. And he took that chance on the person that was ahead of a small security function within WorldPay to say, hey, you can have your first CISO gig, and consequently spent 3.5 years there building a team of about 28 by the end of it, and the whole security program and stuff. So that got me that leap into the world. And obviously, as I'm sure everyone knows, once you've got a title, it's much easier to move around than being the person who's stepping up into it. So they're probably 3 of the people that had the most impact on my career in terms of helping me problem solve and get into security early on, and then getting that first CISO gig. So yeah, probably the biggest influences. And actually, I'll go one more. Alan Osborne, who was the CISO of WellPay when I was there, he gave me a lot of opportunities to kind of grow in his team. Him and Sam Butler, who was my actual boss in that team, had a huge amount of growth there and went from kind of I can't remember what title was, manager or something, to senior manager, head of. So I had kind of got a big chunk of growth at WellPay. So yeah, those 4 chunks, 2 people who helped me get good at problem solving, getting security. Alan Osborne, Sam Butler, and WellPay, who just helped me progress my career an awful lot. And then Dave Williams, who gave me that opportunity as my first CISO.
Amazing. I'm sure they appreciate it, mate. Like there's awards. The reason I put it out there, because there's award ceremonies and all that sort of stuff that goes on in the industry, but it's nice to hear from the people that you've actually influenced and where they are now. It's it's an incredible part of especially our industry, if you like, because it's an ever evolving, undeveloped route to the top, right?
Those things are a bit interesting because a lot of those, not saying they go to people who don't deserve it, but a lot of them go to people who are well known, right? So the people who are outspoken, the people who you see, and there's an awful lot of people doing really, really awesome jobs in security who just don't want to shout about it. If you look at the number of people, even in like the limited number of CISOs in the world, look at the number of people who are heads of and CISOs who everyone knows who they are because they talk a lot and they're on what's LinkedIn and they go to do conferences, versus the number of them that there are in the world. It's a really small portion. So I think awards and ceremonies are great, but it's actually the ones that are quietly just doing really awesome jobs and keeping their organizations safe that deserve just as much praise, even if they're not out there and don't necessarily want to be out there, right?
Completely agree, mate. The criteria for those types of things, right, are based on very little quantifiable qualitative information, right? I think it is the vocal ones, but it's the opinions of the quiet ones that tend to be the most valuable at times, right? Which is great. No offense to the ones that are vocal, right?
No. I often wonder because it's I question it because I talk a bit, but I try and balance it with make sure I'm doing my job well as well, right? And it's how much time you spend trying to help the industry and talking to the industry versus how much time you spend helping your organization and your family, whatever else, right? So there's no issue with either. I just think it's and it must be hard if you do an award ceremony. You can't go, you don't know who's doing a quiet job, right? Because they're not out there. So you have to pick from the people you know about, and the people that everyone knows about are the ones that get voted for because everyone knows about them, right? So I think it's kind of self-fulfilling. It's not that it's wrong, but we should take that moment to recognize all the people that are sitting there in security operations and other bits of security teams and heading up teams and dealing with incidents every day and probably struggling with lack of sleep and hard work like the rest of us, but just doing it more quietly. And I think kudos to everyone that's doing a great job and helping our industry.
Yeah, Kevin, thank you so much for sharing your time. I'm sort of resonating with so much that you've said, and even more so from the community build in the alliances. We're just sort of building our own sort of CRM platform and gone through how many conversations that we've actually had over the last 7 years building the alliances, and is in the thousands, So the conversation that you're having here is just I'm picking points in my time and in my time here at the alliances that your points will resonate for so many. So hopefully they get a chance to hear it. But yeah, thanks very much for the time, Mike. We really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you. Really enjoyed it.